Now, family members and listeners alike, we're about to get deep. We're about to go real deep. And I'm going to burst the bubble of many of you with regards to your thought process about the good old U.S. of A., our monetary system, our economy, and the Federal Reserve. Everything I'm about to give you, you can go and research yourself. Trust but verify. I want you to conduct your own research. Please take copious notes, because this is going to take you into a whole new realm, okay, of cognitive enrichment. One in which you'll be able to look and see and hear and listen to exactly what's going on and what has been going on since and through the annals of time as it relates to the U.S. economic system and how things are structured, and how Woodrow Wilson very cleverly allowed the Federal Reserve that ain't got a damn thing to do with being a federal entity. All right, it's not a federal entity, to come into existence when they went down to Jekyll Island, Georgia, and conjured up this Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank. Now listen to me, don't hear me, listen closely, and I will pause occasionally and highlight things that you need to write down and do research on yourself, because all of this information I'm about to give you is easily monetizable. Now I want you to know before I get started, there are certain banks, big boy banks in the United States, that will not be allowed to fail no matter what. So if you're thinking about going ahead and putting some financial institutions in your portfolio, you need to pay attention to this list of banks that I'm going to give you, because these banks are locked and loaded. Come what may, they will be taken care of, even if the government has to come and bail them out. In one instance, the Oracle of Omaha himself came and bailed out one bank, made that bank solid, and that bank has never looked back. These banks get preferential treatment. Take notes. And I'm going to tie these banks and their relationship into the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve is run and operated. Here we go. Now, as you know, Las Vegas is indeed the capital of the world when it comes to gambling. Nevada heavily regulates the casinos, requiring a certain percentage paid back to the gamblers, because you got to pay back some, otherwise the gamblers and the suckers will quit coming. Okay? So, in Las Vegas, they pour billions into their posh establishments, enticing customers into their casinos, and make huge profits, and they do it all legally. Now, if the public felt the casinos were indeed rigged, which they are, they would lose customers, jobs, and billions in tax revenue. You remember the old saying, there's a sucker born every minute? That's a phrase closely associated with P.T. Barnum, who was an American huckster and showman. Early examples of this, okay, is often found and used amongst gamblers and confidence men. Insiders call big Wall Street banks casino banks. Casino banks. I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. You see, these same banks own the Federal Reserve. Oh, I'm going to prove it to you. The banks that I'm about to give you actually have shares in the stock of the Federal Reserve. Whoa. What did I say? Yep. Google what I'm about to give you. Check the information out. Now, you, me, we, the beloved Astros, Wall Street family, and other retail traders and investors directly cannot buy shares in the Federal Reserve. They're not available anymore. But you can indirectly have shares of the banks that have shares in the Federal Reserve. You see where I'm going with this? You gotta be smart. You gotta be clever, okay, to maximize monetizing the oppressor and this oppressive system. Now let's go further. Now, these same banks that I'm about to give you, the casino banks, as I said, they own the Federal Reserve, and they are not satisfied with earning money through traditional banking methods. No, all that's smoke and glass. Your checking account, your savings account, making you a mortgage loan or making you a car loan, no, that's tiddlewinks for them. You see, since the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, banks have become huge investment houses, making trillions of dollars on risky bets while holding bank charters and FDIC insurance. Theoretically, the Federal Reserve oversees the banking system. In practice, they are doing the opposite, though. They are siphoning billions of dollars off in profits at the expense of the public. I'm going to break all this down to you. I'm making some assertions, and I'm going to give you empirical evidence to back up what I'm saying. Now, the casino banks, they regulate themselves. Okay? Now, I'm about to give you, write this down. Get ready to write this down. I'm about to give you the banks that own the New York Fed. The banks that have all the stock of the New York Fed. The largest shareholders of the New York Fed are J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of New York Mellon. Let me repeat them now. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and the Bank of New York Mellon. So if the Federal Reserve, buying through its federal Fed banks around the United States, they divided up the United States into certain regions, and each region is overseen by a Fed bank. If the Federal Reserve controls the U.S. economic system, wouldn't it make sense, if you can buy shares in that entity, the Federal Reserve, for you to look at owning shares of the banks that have shares in the Federal Reserve, since you can't get shares in the Federal Reserve? Get it? Now, the 5 banks that I just gave you, they represent 2/3 of the 8 global systematically important banks. They go under the acronym of GSIBs here in the United States. The other 3 GSIBs are Bank of America, a shareholder in the Richmond Fed; Wells Fargo, a shareholder of the San Francisco Fed; and State Street Bank, a shareholder in the Boston Fed. Do you hear what I'm telling you? Don't believe me? Check it yourself. And you be well advised to have some position in Masters banks, which have shares in what? The Federal Reserve, which does what? Control the U.S. economic system. Once again, the other 3 GISBs, and what does GISB stand for? Global Systematically Important Banks. They are Bank of America, a shareholder in the Richmond Fed Bank; Wells Fargo, a shareholder of the San Francisco Fed Bank; and State Street, a shareholder in the Boston Fed Bank. Now, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley are also 4 of the 5 largest holders of the high-risk derivatives out there. Bank of America is the 5th. Now, these same Wall Street banks also participated in various advisory groups where they hash out best practices for their industry. Those best practices were not sufficient to prevent J.P. Morgan Chase from becoming a 3-count felon, Citigroup a 1-count felon, and 4 of the banks from actively engaging in creating and selling subprime investments that blew up the U.S. financial system, the nation's economy, and a good swath of Wall Street in 2008. It was Thomas Paine who once said, very intelligently, quote, "A body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not be trusted by anybody," end quote. Once again, Thomas Paine, a body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not be trusted by anybody, end quote. Theoretically, Congress regulates the Fed. Yeah, right. But in practice, the Fed buys government debt at 0 interest, allowing the politicos to buy votes and keep their power. Family members, what we see is blatant hypocrisy. Wall Street on Parade reports J.P. Morgan recently pleaded guilty to their 4th and 5th felony counts. What did they do? They simply paid $920 million in fines and then awarded their CEO, a former Fed board member, by the way, a $50 million bonus, and not a damn person went to jail. But you know, you can go to jail for bouncing a check. Family members, the Fed prints money, banks pay the fines, nobody goes to jail. But wait, there's more. When we come back, I'm going to go over a powerful